afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to the China Working Group workshop. I think I'm going to start now because we have a very high schedule. I introduce myself as Sam-Kee Cheng. I'm a student assistant professor at the university. Now I have been coordinator for the China Working Group for quite a number of years now. So we have a tradition of holding workshops before the organizers of this workshop as part of the conference program. This is one of the about and team. So our topic today is the rise of China and its implications to the world. This is an exciting topic. We have 5 honorable guests that are going to deliver their specific topics. So I will introduce them at the beginning, and they will be doing a 10-minute presentation each. After all the presentations, we will have the roundtable discussion among the speakers. If we have enough time, we will have maybe go straight to the Q&A sessions so that you have the chance to contribute and ask questions. So we will finish at 3:45 so that we have a 15-minute break before the last session of the day on Palestine. Okay. Our first speaker is Michael Robert. Michael Robert is an economist and project researcher. He is author of several books on the world economy, the long depression, and capitalism in the 21st century. He blogs regularly on economic issues at the next recession.wordpress.com. I'm sure that a lot of you are followers. So his topic today is the rise of China's economy both before and after that. Our second speaker is Professor Dic Lo. He is a political economist specializing in China and world development. He has been with Soas University of London for almost 30 years. He is currently now with Economics School, Deng College of Sun University in Guangzhou, China. Dic Lo has been active in the economic profession and the broader intellectual circles in China, holding various visiting and adjunct positions in Chinese universities since the turn of the century. Dic Lo has also published many papers in journals, both in English and in Chinese. His books include Markets and Institutional Regulations in Chinese Industrialization, China's Transformational Growth, Alternative to Neoliberal Globalizations. So his topic today is China and the challenge of the new productive forces. Our third speaker will join us from Beijing online, Elias Jabbour. He is a consultant to the presidency of the New Development Bank as well, an associate professor on leave from the Faculty of Economic Sciences at the State University of Rio de Janeiro. He holds many positions and also has been publishing his work widely. He was the economic advisor to the presidency of the Chamber of Deputies. He also had experience in the fields of geography, economics, with an emphasis on human economic geography, political economy, international political economy, economic planning. His work mainly focuses on China categories of transition to socialism, national and comparative development strategies and experiences, the Marxist category of socio-economic formation, the independent thought of Anicio Rangel. He is also winner of the Special Book Award of China. His topic today is China's going out as an alternative towards planning in peripheral countries. Our fourth speaker is Salam Alshareef. He is assistant professor at Grenoble School of Management in France. His work focuses on the political economy of China's relations with the global South and West Asia. His articles have been published in journals including New Political Economy, Journal of Economic Issues, and Area Development and Policy. His topic today is the political significance of China's position and actions regarding Palestinian question in the aftermath of October the 7th. Our last speaker is Radhika Desai. Radhika is professor at the Department of Political Studies, University of Manitoba, Winnipeg, Canada. She is author of many books, including Geopolitical Economy After U.S. Hegemony, Globalization and Empire, Slouching Towards Utopia, From Congress to Hinduva in Indian Politics, Intellectuals and Socialism, Social Democrats and the Labour Party. She is also editor of Revitalizing Marxist Theory for Today's Capitalism, Developmental and Cultural Neoliberal Nationalism. So her topic today is China and the role of socialism in the geopolitical economy of the capitalist world. Okay, so without further ado, I will invite Michael Roberts to make our first presentation and then do our next meeting. Michael Roberts, over to you.
Thank you, Sam. I'm just going to briefly discuss the question of China's economic growth, both before and after Deng coming into the leadership of the Communist Party in 1978. The general view amongst many mainstream economists is that China had very poor growth rates before Deng, and then thanks to capitalism, after Deng, growth rates shot up. And it's all due to the fact that the capitalists helped China to go forward, both through investment and through opening up of trade through the World Trade Organization. But I would dispute that characterization, and I think the data will quickly show that, which is what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to present a few graphs to you to explain what I mean. So before and after Deng. So let's take the first graph. I mean, the first graph just says that after 1949, between 53, after the seizure of state power by the Communist Party's People's Army, there was an expropriation of the landlords and the domestic capitalists and foreign investment acquisitions over a period of time. And eventually we had the establishment of a series of 5-year plans, the first one being in 1953-57, and in 1958-62, the second 5-year plan. These 5-year plans laid the basis for the direction of investment and production in China. Now the state was running and directing investment both in agriculture and in industry and in services, and the development of a nationalized banking system. So this was the beginning of a state-run planned economy, which hadn't existed, of course, before 1949. Did this mean disaster for economic growth? Well, here is the growth rate presented before Deng. These are more or less the official figures presented by the Chinese national government. These figures are disputed in the West, particularly by the US Conference Board, which has what they call an alternative growth rate figure, which they present on their database. I've analyzed very closely why they have a lower rate of growth than the official figures. Personally, I think their arguments for lowering the rate of growth are bogus. I can't go into those in detail now. Therefore, well, let's look at the figures presented and held by the national statistics. And you can see that over the period from 53 to 78, before Deng, the average real growth rate of GDP was 6.7%. There are only really two periods where you see negative development, a sharp drop. That is in the Great Leap Forward, so-called, from 58 to about 62. And you can see that there was a significant drop in real output at that period, and also during the Cultural Revolution in the late 60s. So what we have here is two disruptive periods. Excluding those, even taking in those to account, you have an average real growth rate in real GDP of 6.7%. That is hardly a description of a disaster on the part of state planning and investment before Deng. Now, I had a quick look at measuring China's growth rate before and after Deng against India's growth rate. And this time, on the before Deng and after Deng, I have used the lower figures presented by the Conference Board and other estimates. And you can see even before Deng, Chinese growth rate, despite whatever's been happening in China during that period compared to India. India had independence at the same time, but it certainly didn't have a struggle and a war that continued for some time, and the closure, the Korean War as well. You can see even then that Chinese growth rate was still higher than India's in the pre-Deng period. And in the post-Deng period, although India's growth rate rises as well, there is a massive increase in the growth rate on average for real GDP in China. So China has been outstripping India not only after Deng, but also before Deng. And one of the points I think made by Deng at the time when he took over, and I think this is key to understanding this, is that the policies of using foreign investment and allowing the private sector to expand will not weaken the predominant position of the public sector, which is the basic feature of the economy as a whole. On the contrary, those policies are intended in the last analysis to develop reductive forces more vigorously and strengthen the public sector. So long as the public sector plays a predominant role in China's economy, polarization can be avoided. If we like, we haven't moved, contrary to the view of many mainstream economists, to a full-out capitalism run by the Communist Party in China after 1978, but we still have basically a state-led economy, a large capitalist sector, but a state-led economy based still on forms of planning which direct investment and production in that way. And finally, the graph that perhaps tells us all that we can say about the difference in the nature of China's development growth either before and after Deng is, if we look at recessions since 1974, so mainly the after Deng period, we can see in the global recessions which took place around the world, IC means the imperialist countries, just about in all those recessions, the imperialist countries either had a dramatic fall in their growth rates or a very big negative fall in their growth rates as a result of global recession. That did not affect China. So China clearly has a different basis for its economic growth, a different model for its economic growth, which is not based upon capital accumulation through profitability. And when profitability and profits fall and there's a collapse in investment, you lead to a collapse in production and employment. That has not happened in the case of Chinese growth, except for those two political periods that I talked about before Deng. So I think these very simple economic evidence shows that there is something clearly different about the Chinese economy. And it wasn't just the change towards a more market-based economy after Deng that made the big difference. And that's me.
Thank you, Michael. Great. Okay, so no, we can.
This opportunity to give this presentation. Now, so what I will say is to give, in a sense, a conceptual overview of what is known as the new productive forces that are now at the moment that are very much everyone in China.
One moment.
Yes, it is.
That's okay.
Yes. Can put it in presentation mode to make it larger. Yes, great. That's perfect.
Okay, I will presentation. China is going out as an alternative towards to planning peripheral countries. When I speak about planning here, this is a planning in terms of trade and investment, foreign trade and investment. First slide. I think that there's the competition economic between capitalism and socialism, and is the main field of battle between these just two systems. In this point, in order to illustrate my point, I remember both Lenin and Deng Xiaoping have looked for shift the focus from the confrontation to trade cooperation, and from the war, military war, to trade and future trade cooperation. Lenin and Deng Xiaoping followed this way at the time, one century years ago, and 4 years ago, 4 years ago, the Lenin Deng Xiaoping followed this way. The shift the focus from the military confrontation to trade cooperation and future confrontation between capitalism and socialism. To embrace this kind of point of view, we should give up the Western academic Marxism and some discussions that like Chinese imperialism, the law of value, operational law of value, socialism, the trend of denial politics and positivist postulates of Marxism, because there is a shift of mindset when we embrace this kind of approach to understand the competition between capitalism and socialism nowadays, and focused more in experience of Eastern Marxism like China, Vietnam, Laos, People's Korea, and Cuba. Not more. I think that we should to understand the Marxism not like a moral science or a social justice science, and focus Marxism as a science of political power. You could make the link between the first point here, the competition between capitalism and socialism, and the main field of this competition between these two systems in economics affairs, and observe the Marxism as science of political power. More than I don't know if there is Marxism, development of Marxism out of the observation of the observe the socialist experience like China, like Vietnam, and Laos and others. About the ways to socialism in 21st century, I think that there is a very old point: the development of project force. This is the first way to socialism since the publication of my Communist Manifesto to today. The challenge of the challenge to produce goods better than capitalist countries, fight for technological frontiers. This is not a point of view, a positivist point of view to understand socialism. For example, I think that the great field of battle now is the dispute of world market between socialist and capitalist countries. I'm repeat here that this change of mindset require a different point of view, starting point for Marxism, not a positivist Marxism, not a checklist Marxism, because the socialist experience in our days, in our epoch, demands the dispute of world market and offer an alternative financialized capitalism. I told a few weeks ago with Radhika Desai between the difference between capitalism and socialism in our epoch. I think that the great difference is the capitalism is a financialized mode of production, and socialism not. This is the main difference between the two systems in our epoch. And the socialism should offer, in sense of dispute of market, world markets, should offer alternative to financialized capitalism. This is one point. Our mission in this sense, observe the socialism, mainly the Chinese socialism, without petit bourgeois academicism and Western checklists. I think that we should to think out of the box to understand the ways for socialism in 21st century. I repeat here, the dispute of world market is the main field of combat between the two systems. I don't know if I right, but I think in the sense. The global South challenge for development. I think that the development as a way to global South to socialism under mediation of national projects. For example, in Latin America, there's Venezuela, Bolivia, Nicaragua. In Africa, disappear countries like Burkina Faso, Niger, Mali, and other countries. They are not socialist countries, but they become national projects oriented to socialism. There is a mediation between the capitalism and socialism through national projects like Venezuela and others. Peripheral countries can't create conditions for development and planning by themselves. The peripheral countries historically use trends created abroad to develop their economies. The classical case of there is a classical case of Brazil from 13 to 80s. Brazil enjoy the automotive sector trend and install here in my country, here not here in my country, foreign companies. But beside these foreign companies, emerged more or less from 2,000 to 3,000 little enterprise, ancillary but national enterprise. Enterprise in the automotive chains of values, industrial values, automotive chains of values in this industry. The result of this import substitution in Brazil project was the emergence of the largest metal mechanic in manufacturing of the world in Brazil in the 80s. I don't know if you know, Brazil in the 80s, the bigger metal mechanic industry was started in Brazil. After the neoliberal era was destroyed, but this is the great point in Brazil. Enjoy the trend created by from abroad, the automotive sector to develop our country. A great import substitution project. I think that China in our epoch launched a great trend to global South. The trend to export export infrastructures and industries. Related industries. I made a few weeks ago a work for President Lula da Silva and about the Belt and Road Initiative, and where I try to convince him through Dilma Rousseff the importance to Brazil become member of the Belt and Road Initiative, because not only because the investment in infrastructures, but because the possibilities for reindustrialization of Brazil through Belt and Road Initiative. For example, China have reached 70 cooperation, industrial cooperation agreements with countries from Africa and Latin America, and I think that Brazil should do, and global South in general, should to grasp this trend launched by China for our reindustrialization. China is going global and Belt and Road Initiative and the planning for foreign trade. And the first, continued my argument, the first time after Washington Consensus, a great trend to development to appear to global South. China become a financial, industrial, and trade superpower. China is going global and opening the room for a new round of development for global South. And on the other hand, a great imperialist reaction. The emergence of China and the emergence of China and its schemes of foreign trade opened the necessity of planning of foreign trade to global South countries to enjoy this opportunity. Look, the example of Brazil during the 30s and 80s, when we grasped the trend emerged in the United States for our automotive sector to industrialize our economy, and now you should observe the trend launched by China to planning our foreign trade and foreign trade investment to enjoy this opportunity opened by China. Two graphs here to end my presentation. The growth of China, United States share in global GDP, the comparison between current exchange rates and purchasing power parity. In other words, China and the United States is the difference between them is less now than 20 years ago. China become a great industrial power, and we should to observe this trend to enjoy these standards. United States, there is no, in Brazil now, people, there is a great discussion if Brazil should or not become member of Belt and Road Initiative. There is a group in government and in Brazil. No, but Brazil is we are Western country. You should observe the trends from United States and Europe. The commerce, trade, investment in China is not a good for us because we open room for another kind of dependence. I disagree with this point of view because the United States and Europe they doesn't nothing to offer to Brazil, for example, in terms of the productive investments and import and a new round for import substitution Brazil. But China is other thing. I think that China open room for a new round for our industrialization, and the last figure is the global South and global North share in global GDP. I try here to show the trend of global South led by China to become the new center of system in the world. This new system of the world is with China with the core is a essential is essential to understand the future of global South and the future of industrialization for global South. This was my point about the alternative for global South. I repeat here that I think that the Chinese raise open a new round for industrialization of opportunities for industrialization for our countries, global South and Brazil. This is one point. Not only in sense. In observe the socialism, the competition between socialism and capitalism in economic affairs, and in the dispute between capitalism and socialists socialism of the world market. And the Belt and Road Initiative is a great expression of this dispute. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Elias. Thank you.
Okay, wow, thank you. This attendance is really great. Thank you very much for coming to this. I must say I feel very privileged to be part of this panel, partly because I think that I tend to kind of focus on China more part-time than full-time. But nevertheless, I have a few reflections to offer on the theme of China and the role of socialism in what I call the geopolitical economy of the capitalist world. Next slide. So in outline, I just want to first give a caveat and an invitation, and then I want to introduce it by what I'm going to say with two questions. I'm going to say a few words about what I mean by geopolitical economy and one of its key components, uneven and combined development, and then I want to talk about both capitalist and socialist combined development, just as to anticipate. By uneven development, I basically mean imperialism. And by combined development, I basically mean anti-imperialism. And the content of anti-imperialism, even more than wars or anything, is actually development of a meaningful sort, development of the forces of production. So, and then I want to say something about development and socialism. And I should say that having listened to the previous presentations, I find that you will find, and I find, there are loads of resonances, so I really look forward to the discussion. Next slide, please. So my caveat is that this is a very, very preliminary set of thoughts. I have been developing them a bit in various things I've been doing, but I very much would invite engagement, both critical as well as supportive, as well as engagement that takes us off on and what I may consider initially as a tangent. But I really invite it because we need to study this. I think this is a much bigger project than I can accomplish on my own. So it's very preliminary. It's very preliminary for it on a very, very large canvas in which I invite you to join me. And some of the works that in which I have presented what the foundations of what I'm about to say is my 2013 book, Geopolitical Economy, my more recent book, which is, by the way, also open access, so everybody can get a PDF for free, Capitalism, Coronavirus, and War, a Geopolitical Economy, in which I very much update as well as elaborate the analysis presented in geopolitical economy. And the one in the middle, by far the easiest to read, and I invite you all to read it, a manifesto which some colleagues in the International Manifesto Group and I drafted, and which hundreds of people have already signed, which we entitled From a True Pluripolarity Towards Socialism, a manifesto. And the ideas there, as I say, are very much resonate with what various other people have to say, and of course what I'm about to say. So next slide, please. The two questions I take to be really, I find that there is a big theoretical deficit. For example, Elias's presentation already referred to, essentially theorizing China, really thinking of it in terms of sort of a Marxism of power, sort of an Eastern Marxism. But what I want to say is that the original Marxism, which has been radically misinterpreted by much of what passes for Western Marxism, needs to be retrieved. And if we retrieve it, we will find the resources in it to very profoundly understand the historical role of socialism in the international relations or the geopolitical economy of the capitalist world, seeing it as something that has emerged necessarily from the dynamics of capitalism, just as Marx saw socialism as emerging necessarily from the dynamics of class struggle. So also he has given us the tools of seeing it as emerging from the dynamics of international struggle, of the struggle of imperialism and anti-imperialism. So the first thing is that because although China, the rise of China is one of the most discussed topics in the world, but it is on the whole discussed in empirical terms. And if theories are brought to bear, they are sort of really mid-level theories, but I think we can theorize it on a grand scale. So, so essentially, what is the significance of the rise of socialist countries in a world dominated by capitalist countries? Is it an aberration? You know, the Russian Revolution was premature, the Chinese Revolution was premature. They are basically, attempts which will fail to go beyond capitalism in a backward country, etc. Is it a premature leap into socialism before its time had come? Is it a historical accident or mistake? And I would argue that if you take geopolitical economy, which claims, and please let this claim it on your own account, but which claims to go back to the original Marx that is obscured by Western Marxism, we will find a way of seeing it as a necessary outcome. And secondly, therefore, in visualizing the transition from capitalism, is class struggle the only dynamic? And our class is the sole agents of socialism. Do imperialism and national anti-imperialist resistance play no role? This is another question which is connected with it. Next slide, please. So very quickly, by geopolitical economy, I proposed geopolitical economy in 2013 out of dissatisfactions that go back a couple of decades before that. I had never joined the globalization bandwagon when it was inaugurated in the 1990s, and out of a lot of cogitation coming out of that, and eventually also ending up criticizing ideas of US hegemony, I proposed a geopolitical economy. It came out of what I call dissatisfaction, what I call cosmopolitan approaches like globalization and US hegemony. It also, once I began to look for ways to address this dissatisfaction and propose alternatives, I also found that much of what passes for Western Marxism is no good. We have to go back to Marx's analysis of capitalism as contradictory value production. All three words are very important. So I was dissatisfied with that. And of course, its inability, Western Marxism's inability to understand imperialism, and the role of nation states in capitalism on a world scale and domestically. And it also arose from a return to Marx's analysis, as I said, of capitalism as contradictory value production. And I conceive of geopolitical economy, to use Marx's words, as a way of understanding the relations of producing nations. These are Marx's words, and they are very carefully chosen. They are not the relations of capitalist nations, because he's very aware that in the world at any given time, there are not only capitalist nations. There are also nations that are pre or post-capitalist. And all of this matters. The main elements, I would say, of geopolitical economy are an insistence that nation states are material states, are critically important, not least because capitalism is contradictory, and when the invisible hand of the market shakes, the visible hand of the state is needed to steady it. That imperialism is rooted in the contradictions of capitalism, which is not a conclusion which is easy to come to if you subscribe to one or more of the many Marxist economics that are so common, because they generally tend to propose a capitalism that has hardly any contradictions, or explicitly no contradictions. Once imperialism arises, rooted in capitalism's contradictions, it gives rise to the dynamic of uneven and combined development. As dominant nations seek to exert their control over the rest of the world and make it pay for its own contradictions, what you then get is a resistance from those parts of the world that are able to resist, have the political will and the political capacity to resist, and that resistance takes the form of combined development, which I take to be state-directed development of the forces of production, much as you saw in the Soviet Union, and later on, of course, today we see on an ongoing basis in China, and this is a unique interpretation of the logic of uneven and combined development, and why it's unique, I can't go into right now, but we can discuss later. And I see, therefore, ideologies of globalization, US hegemony, all the ideologies that think of the world economy as a seamless whole, in which nations, either nation states or no nation state matters, or only one nation state, the hegemonic one, matters. All of these ideologies are rubbish. The world economy is divided meaningfully into national economies and national states, and the most important thing about that, the most brutally material fact about them, is that some of these countries are rich and others are poor. This matters a lot. Next slide, please. So very quickly then, I see uneven and combined development essentially, Trotsky himself said that he didn't like this expression, and by the way, this conception was not confined to Trotsky. We find it in Marx, we find it in Lenin, and many of Trotsky's contemporaries as well. But essentially, capitalist contradictions give rise to imperialism or uneven development. It is an imperative. Historically, however, it has been opposed by combined development. In the first forms of combined development were actually the industrialization of countries like Germany, the United States, and Japan against the domination of on the world market. Since then, of course, the most effective opponents of the dominance of capitalist countries, the homelands of capitalism in the world economy, have been socialist states. The Soviet Union was the most important challenge to that, and then China. This raises the question, why is that? Why has socialism become a more effective challenge to the dominance of the capitalist world than other capitalist countries? And if capitalism is the best thing for developing the forces of production, what's the problem? Well, there I have recently been arguing more and more explicitly, but I in relation to Lenin, but I have made a general argument in my other works. Lenin was right. In the early 20th century, capitalism had already reached its highest stage. This accords with what Marx said, that once capitalism has entered the monopoly phase, that will be the phase in which it must make the transition to capitalism. It may be surprising, and again, I'm willing to discuss it. I've been writing a lot about this. So, and I would say that he was right. This then requires us to understand that imperialism itself is not eternal. A lot of people love saying, oh, imperialism has so much power. The United States is more powerful than Britain was, and imperialism is more powerful than ever, and so on and so forth. No. 1914 was the high point of imperialism. Since then, it has been on the decline. The decline is much slower than I'd like it to be, but nevertheless, it has been a decline. So that is why the 30 years crisis from 14 to 45 was bookended by the two greatest revolutions that we have witnessed, the Russians and the Chinese. This was followed by decolonization, which witnessed at least some development in the developing world against imperialist power. And although we saw in this long process the demise of Soviet and Eastern European socialism, this is simply a sign that the path to socialism is not a straight one. It will have many zigzags and detours and diversions and so on. And as a friend of mine, Carlos Martinez, put it, this is the title of his book on the Soviet experience. The Soviet experience was not the end of socialism. It was not the beginning of the end of socialism. It was only the end of the beginning of socialism. He's, of course, quoting Churchill, as you may know. Next slide, please. Okay, so since 1945, basically, we have seen some capitalist development. And by the way, even though notwithstanding the efforts of the imperialist countries, we have seen a persistence of socialism. Socialism is like that mold that keeps in the whack-a-mole game that keeps cropping up everywhere. Even in the most hopeless cases, countries try socialism, or what appear to be hopeless cases, I should say, because actually for any kind of development, for any kind of even survival economy, there is often no capitalist option. That's why we have seen the persistence of socialism. So if we had a golden age of capitalism, because Lenin's thesis is refuted by saying, look, capitalism experienced a golden age. Actually, it was not a golden age of capitalism. It was a golden age of a world economy in which capitalism took a very reformed form in the imperialist countries. It had a vast slew of countries from Prague to Pyongyang were socialists, and the developing countries were pursuing some kind of state-led development. That's what created the golden age, not capitalism. And in its homeland, it was on its best behavior, constrained by the lingering power of an organized working class and anti-imperialist resistance abroad. And the neoliberal era, the past 40 plus years, have actually taught us that allowing capitalism to do what it wants is not going to create a rejuvenated and revitalized capitalism. In fact, it has created an innovative and financialized capitalism. And this only further underlines the point. If we had to wait 40 years to see that Lenin was right, but it certainly shows us that there was something to what he was saying. So neoliberalism has revealed the productive debility of capitalism, and so much so that the United States today can only try to retain its power, which is disappearing fast, but it tries to retain it only by trying to destroy the few productive engines that capitalism had left in Germany and Japan. It has little to offer the third world, and it's today being economically and technologically challenged. By the way, I say by China, but it's also being challenged by Russia. So is there anything else? Yeah, I think that's the last slide. So I'm sorry, I've taken a bit longer than I should, but capitalism, therefore, to conclude, involves both class and national exploitation. Socialism failed in imperialist countries after the First World War, and that was also because of imperialism. Imperialism allowed the governments of First World countries to offer more to the working classes, the guns and butter alliance, which was not an option in many third world countries. So, and today capitalism's inability to afford development outside these countries, indeed its need to suppress development there, has made socialist transitions there an option, the only option where political forces existed, where paths to the development of productive forces in a sustained manner could only be socialist. Successful capitalist development, where it took place, could only take place under the wing of socialism. And elsewhere, capitalist development, such as in India or Brazil, remains constrained by the inability of these countries to develop a sufficiently broad and deep internal market, their dependence on metropolitan technology, and very importantly, their openness, the openness of their capital flows. To the extent that these are open, the elites will always have a subordinate relationship with first world countries. But I've gone on enough. Thank you for your patience, and I look forward to the discussion.
Discussion. Yes, Shannon. Oh, right. So I will give priorities to our speakers first because according to our agenda, should be still some roundtable discussion among the speakers. I think I'll give you priorities to the speakers to comment and ask questions. If you have no, or we'll just go to the Q&A. Salam, please. Okay. You all. So, do you have any comments for this? You can say it now, and then we will just one response.
Maybe we should go in the same order as before.
Okay. Yes. Michael, do you have any burning questions or comments to make after presentations that you have heard?
Well, they're all very interesting. I think Dic's point that we have moved to a position in China where economic growth now depends increasingly upon the technological paradigm rather than simply the drive forward for capital investment, which, and obviously, as he pointed out, technology developments have taken place for some decades in China, but we're reaching the point, as he says, where given the demographic position that China's in, it doesn't have a sharp increase in working age population or the labor force. In fact, the contrary, increasingly the growth will depend upon increasing the productivity rate. And that productivity rate is increasingly going to depend on technology, semiconductors, and all these new areas of growth that the West is also relying on. We see at the moment, for example, which is quite an indication of where we're going, the complete AI hype, which is taking place in the West, which is leading to massive increases in the stock prices of companies based upon AI, in particular NVIDIA. And yet we also see that is becoming completely out of track with what is actually going on in the productive sectors of the economy. NVIDIA has taken another huge hit today in the stock market, which is an indication of the way in which capitalism tries to develop productive forces in this anarchic manner without necessarily reducing the results. And the gap between China and the West, in particular the US, on technology, it continues to narrow as far as I can see. The other point I will make about Elias's comments about, I thought it was important for us, and perhaps the audience, to consider that what Elias is saying is, look, we have a myriad of peripheral countries around the world who do not have any possibility of achieving planned investment to develop their economies. On the contrary, they are being exploited and oppressed by imperialism from the global north, and the only hope they have, short of a revolutionary change in those countries, and even then, with a revolutionary change with these small countries, they're in a very difficult position to develop. It requires the help of countries that do have the resources and the ability to develop projects, even if it's only by project basis, in order to raise their level of their economy and their living standards. Recently, I saw an interesting piece which showed how China has played the major role in any developments taken place in the African countries, contrary to the position that imperialism's taken in the African countries over the last few decades. Now they're panicking because they can see that China has been able to gain influence in various countries in Africa because of its project program. I won't go any further on that, just to add that the argument that China engages through the Belt and Road and other projects like this in order to put these countries in some sort of debt depression where they can trap, which they cannot escape, is a complete myth. The evidence is there to show quite the contrary, that if you take your money from hedge funds, from private equity, from the IMF and the World Bank, then you will be in a debt trap. If you take it from China, yes, you've got to pay your interest. Yes, you've got to repay your debt if you can, but it's certainly by no means any sort of debt trap.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, Dic, do you have any comments for our speakers? Any questions for them? Or any response as well?
Yeah, I don't really have any, point to make about the
No problem.
presentations.
Yes, that's fine.
But just some thoughts on the, in particular, in relation to the final presentation on the future prospects for non-capitalist way of development. That because if we look back at the records, that it has been very disappointing, just in terms of narrow defined in terms of the development and divergence of the or uneven development is indeed the not just the dominant trend, it's really the normalcy of what has been going on over the past, whether you look at the neoliberal globalization era over the past 4 decades, or even longer, looking at the post-war, that what the World Bank now calls it the middle income trap actually is the reflection of the broader picture that loss of development and divergence has always been there. That if you just simply look at the figures, the proportion of population in the so-called high-income economies or in the OECD economy has remained. It's not just stable, but really increasing over the past 4 decades or 6 decades. The proportion of population in the club of rich countries as a proportion of the world overall. And in the meantime, the income level of the rest of the world relative as a ratio to the OECD income actually has also been falling very dramatically over the past 4 or 6 or 7 decades. So the record is clear enough. Development in the sense of catching up with the advanced countries that has never happened. And the only exception nowadays, what we have seen is really China. That China's per capita GDP as a ratio to the OECD in the year 1980, it was 2%. By now, almost 30%. And because the Chinese population is slightly bigger than that of the OECD put together. So, and China's per capita GDP peak in 2022 was about 97% of the threshold of the high income status. So most likely that if China is to cross the threshold and stay on, then the world total of the population in high income economy would more than double in the years to come, very quickly, in several years. Now, does this indicate to us that it is in fact possible to have a peaceful way of development? But of course, China started with a revolution, but then at least over the past 40 years, it has been pursuing the path of peaceful coexistence with the capitalist world, and it has undergone such a spectacular development. Does it imply that peaceful, not necessarily transition to socialism, but at least development is possible? It's a big unknown, because the advanced capitalist countries are not doing all their best to try to suffocate China's development. And I would argue that by extension also would be suffocating the development of the rest of the developing world for various reasons. One reason that the advanced countries have become very much financialized, speculatively financialized, and that's detrimental to the developing world. And secondly, monopolized, that are all the technology, in particular technology associated with the green transition, which has become compulsory that everyone has to take up the burden, every country burden in the face of the climatic change. And the China's green technology industries have developed so fast, overtaking the advanced countries, and in the meantime, making all these products much cheaper than those supplied by the advanced countries. So if China is to accept the recommendation, advice, or the just recently raised by the U.S. security advisor in his visit to Beijing last week, that China should not develop all these new technology industries. China should continue to play the role as the world factory, supplying all the low value-added, labor-intensive products. And that's what also been mentioned by the Janet Yellen visiting China just a few months ago. If China continue to develop this high technology in the green technology industries, then there would be no escape that the advanced countries would put into maximum effort in confrontation with China. So this is the point I want to try to make, that is a big argument.
Thank you, Dic. Okay, Elias, do you have any comments or you want to give any feedback?
Yes, I want to repeat the point about the. I think that the transition. I reach a point in our discussion. Radhika and Bob McKee raised this point too in your own terms. That it's impossible to understand the transition from capitalism to socialism without understand the dispute of world market as a part of this transition. This is one point. For example, the experience of Venezuela in Latin America. There is no socialism in Venezuela without China, without Chinese support to China. The experience in Bolivia, the same thing. The Nicaragua experience, something. In other words, without China became a great financial power, there is no possibility for socialism in these countries. In Africa as well, my point of view. In resume, my first point is that there is no a given understanding about the transition from capitalism to socialism in world terms without understand the trade war between the two systems. So I think this is one point. The other point, I think that we need to find a science to understand China, because everybody know me here. I don't think socialism in terms moral science and just social justice science. I think that socialism or socialism like a checklist or A, B, C, D. No, I think that the concept is manifests itself in a real movement, and China now delivered to us a lot of flows of movement and movements to understand, and from these flows and movements, we can create categories, theories, and concept to understand China today, and we read a real vision about socialism. This is one point. That is, we should to build a science to understand China and the socialism in our epoch. I think these things in these points the last during all my life. I will launch my next book about that, and I absorb the critique from Michael Roberts. Michael Roberts was launched a great critics for my last book. I will observe. I observed these critics in about law of value in socialism, and I will try to deliver a more deep vision about Chinese socialism in my next book with Ronald Boyer. Thank you so much. This is my point.
Yes. Okay, to you, Salam. Yes.
Just a quick comment on the respect to the topic of nature of Chinese development path, whether it's socialist, capitalist, etc. What always marked me in Western academia, when I speak about Western academia, it's not only in the West, even in the South. Many in the South, including in China, have Western Marxism, etc. Is that we directly refuse the idea that there is a possible socialist transition path in China on the basis that there are capitalist elements. Indeed, one of the basic ideas in Marxism dialectic is a contradiction in the unity. Okay? So the first question is there is any model and criteria to evaluate the nature of the development path? Is only the question of social condition in early period of socialist transition is enough to the number of working hours, social job condition, etc. Is it enough for a socialist capitalist development? There was a question of primitive accumulation, which fueled through huge colonialism. China is not colonizing, for sure. There are exploitation of labor inside China and the condition of work, etc. But who has said that is not part of socialist transition? I mean, we need a reference at this level. And in Western academia, these elements are not made explicit. We just directly delegitimize the idea that it's mere discussion that what's happening in China could be a socialist transition. And with respect to the Elias idea and others about the primacy of politics over economics, I do agree, but at the same time, there is a dialectic between politics and economics. The presence, the social presence of capitalist classes inside China, which is now dominated by the Communist Party, it poses potentially a risk for passive revolution, etc. So this needs to be considered. Also, so that I consider that since the crisis 2007, 2008, the neoliberal crisis, the capitalist position inside of China have been weakened because their global system is in crisis and all its elements at international level, national level, are in crisis, and the other part is in advance. Second element in respect to China as China's international role, developmental role. I work on this subject. This is my main research topic. Indeed, the question of Chinese rise and the development policy space for southern countries. And just what I can say, it shows that Chinese rise constitutes necessary conditions for social emancipation in the global south, but it's not sufficient. There should be a political project at the national and regional level which could fructify this international condition. And that's it.
Thank you, Radhika.
Okay, very quickly, and in no particular order. Dic, I really like your point about the previous industrial transitions and then what is the future. And I would just like to raise the following point, which is that I don't think that the industrial transition is at all possible in Western countries today, simply because it needs a state role of a scale and scope that is simply not possible today after 40 years of neoliberalism. And also it needs a set of bank industry relations which are not possible today in the financialized capitalism of the neoliberal countries. Also, I would say that another factor that will play into this is that many technologies today that can be developed seem to require some kind of a socialized, socialist orientation, which cannot take place under the mark of private property. Secondly, on your divergence point, I have to say that, while I entirely agree that the statistics look pretty grim, you really also have to move beyond the statistics a little bit and understand two sets of points. Number one, very quickly, I think we need to understand how the statistics of the Western world, particularly the United States, is put together, and the critique that has been made by my friend Jacob Asher in particular, but I think many others point out that the way in which finance is counted in US GDP statistics closely overstates US GDP. So that sort of thing, and also the exchange rate effects and so on should be taken into account. But more importantly, I'd like to say that it is in order to contest imperialism, it is not necessary to become as rich as the imperialist countries. It is simply necessary to become sufficiently powerful economically and otherwise to resist imperialism. The rest then can happen, and quite frankly, who is to say that we all want everybody to live like Americans? I mean, if we all live like Americans, then that actually toppled very quickly. So I think we need to ask these other questions when we pose the divergent statistics. Elias, I completely agree with you, and I just wanted to say that the tweet of Michael Roberts that you really love, and which I also really love, turns out as actually originated by my friend Carlos Martinez, who runs the Friends of Socialist China website. Please check him out, check out his website and so on. But it is a great tweet and it is really worth publicizing. And I just want to say that on the point of China and the rest of the world, I think that the rest of the world, and this also addresses many points that Dic was making, the governments of the rest of the world have to treat China not just as a partner, but also not so much as a model, because I don't think there's any model as such, but as a country whose development experiences from which they could learn something, because the fact of the matter is that if China is really treated as a partner, then every country in the rest of the world will be deindustrialized, and that's the end of the conflict. And I don't think we need that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose I just could, I could make other points, but I
Okay, thank you. So I think we only have one time for one round of questions. So yes, Ellen, and then Pat from the online, and anyone else who wants to yes, raise your hands, and then I will pass it to you. So Ellen first. Yes, if there's a mic there, yes.
Can you all hear me?
Sound check?
Yeah. So probably don't need it. I want to issue a challenge, which is I think we should drop the word for everything. All the speakers have said in this session indicates that this is the wrong word. What we're talking about is a new stage of history. The use of the term Fourth Industrial Revolution implies we look backwards to the Victorian age, to the pre-Victorian age, to the destructive evolution of the motor car and of the oil industry, and the nuclear industry, which dominated. And we also means we are resting in a Schumpeterian, that is to say, Austrian neoliberal framework. What is the difference between the concept of Schumpeter and the concept of Marx? Three things. First of all, this transformation of the new productive forces is driven by human need. That's why the green industries are important. That's why the entire focus is how can we meet the needs of our people? That was not the focus of any of the previous, and the whole concept, second, creative destruction, the view of Schumpeter on this, I strongly urge everybody to read an article of my father, Christopher Freeman, which is published in the 2015 edition of the Economic Journal of Science and Sociology, which I wrote an introduction to, which is called Schumpeter's Business Cycles Revisited. And my father was a Marxist. Any attempt to subordinate him to the legacy of Schumpeter is a travesty. And if you hear it, you should jump on it, right? Because the point is that the creative destruction notion means that you let the market kill millions of people, and that is the only way you can advance the cause of humanity. That's the creative destruction idea. The whole point is that now the new productive forces must build on the old productive forces. The industrialization of Chinese agriculture rested on the village foundation. It didn't say, let's wipe out, creatively destroy all the villages, which is what happened in the imperialist model of development, in order that we can pave the way for Western technology. That's the neoliberal imperialist idea. It's a very different model. And the final thing is the treatment of risk, and I think this is very fundamental, and the reason the state is central to it. In the economics of innovation, the Schumpeterian idea was that innovation is when an entrepreneur and a financier come together and take a product to market. These products are not being developed to take them to market. They're being developed to take them to humanity. And therefore, the agency that deals with risk, which is the point that Dic raised, has to be the state. Because only the state, as actually Matthew Carter pointed out, is capable of taking on risk without destruction. You have to be able to experiment with many different technologies, and that's the real threat. But you can do it in such a way that the consequence of failure is not destruction, but learning. And only the state can manage this relation of innovation, of invention to innovation, to human progress. So just a plea, let's stop using the word fourth industrial revolution. This is the new stage of history.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Pat, please unmute yourself. Yes, please speak now. Yes.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me and see me. I'm based over here in Brazil, but I wanted to talk about the subject of China's strategy towards Palestine, and I feel that the left in the West is not following this subject properly and does not really understand what China's trying to do. Yet China, if you read the China's Global Development Initiative, Security Initiative, and Civilization Initiatives, and particularly its Security Initiative, you can see what its strategy is. What China is trying to do, and events have actually come faster than it was expecting. China is trying to gather together the majority of countries in the world to put pressure on Israel prior to the possibility of an economic embargo on Israel, like what happened with South Africa. And quite early on, after October the 7th, with the Chinese support and the BRICS countries aligned with it, there was an important conference held of the Arab and Islamic states. And it was at that conference, they agreed China's general strategy, which is to push for an international conference of countries to decide on the form of a two-state solution and to take steps towards imposing it. What was interesting was Saudi Arabia actually went a little bit further in that conference, because the conference agreed the strategy, and they actually insisted that that conference should also lay down timetables, deadlines for this event to happen. And we can see towards this effect, China was able to, as you know, get the Gulf states to agree to bury the hatchet to some extent with Iran and to re-establish relations, diplomatic relations, and so on. But another important brick in the wall has been China's role in gathering together the different factions on the Palestinian side and getting them to come out with a unity statement. The reason they did that was because obviously a big stumbling block to any achievement of a two-state solution. I don't want to get into this debate about two-state, one-state. It could be that two states will be a stepping stone towards a one-state solution in the far-off future. But a stumbling block obviously would be that if the Palestinian factions could not unite, if they were at each other's throat, then the Israelis would be able to continue to argue, oh, well, these people, they can't organize themselves. So what is the prospect of a two-state solution? And of course, I think that events are moving in the direction of such an international initiative. And of course, America will try to resist it. And they have a lot of economic force with which to support Israel on its. If Israel was isolated, America could still support it. I mean, after all, Israel is smaller effectively than most of the American states. But obviously, the whole idea is that you build up a huge force internationally behind this, and you put pressure on the Western countries and get them to divide and peel them off. And I think that this is it's not an immediate fix, which is what a lot of people are looking for. But I think it is a good strategy that China is following. And I just thought I'd talk about that.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Thanks for your contribution. And I see gentlemen at the back. So we will have maybe just 4 more questions. I don't think we have time for speakers to respond, but I will let you speak. Yes. If not, then please, can you come over to here? We have the mic here, so we can just make sure that people can see you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for your presentation. And my question, most of the times I see that this is the question I have, and that's about how do you conceptualize the federalist works and this protectionism and economic nationalism? Because most of the development we see in China, in East Asia, even all the time in Europe, is rooted in the works of Frederick List, but in the lectures he's absent. No one talks about Frederick List. So, and you know, he was really critical of individualism, and so he has different layers. How do you conceptualize Frederick List works to your Marxism narration of the work today?
Okay. The gentleman on that side. Okay, or the lady first.
I wanted to ask a question to Elias, if it's possible.
Just say it now. Maybe if we don't have time to respond now after the session, then.
Okay, he mentioned that he was talking to Lula about the Belt and Road Initiative and trying to convince him that this would be a good path to Brazil. So I wanted to know what Lula's response was, if he can tell us, and also if we can go ahead this way, which I agree with him would be right. Is it because of Lula's, particular decision of not even trying, or is it because of the limitations of our conservative Congress that we have now, which would then restrain the ability of the country to even dream of doing that? And the reason why Lula, in that case, wouldn't do it is because of being scared of an impeachment. So, the tension between could he do it or he would have to have too many limitations.
Okay, thank you. And this gentleman, and then Joseph, the last one. Gentleman in the blue shirt. Please. Oh, no, okay, then we go to Joseph. And then Elias, if you can respond to that later.
I want to mention Cuban experience
And I think in relation, China, they did also a great job, but they didn't have this economics of scale and economics of scope. There are many other factors anyway, but maybe geography. Yes, I want to state this explicitly, or the others implicitly, but I want to stress this. And I think China, also in the environmental question, they have a very good experience, did a good job, produced these panels and wind turbines because of these economies of scale and scope. The first and second thing is I would like to mention also the year 1972 when Nixon visited China, and then we had a period of some normal cooperation between USA and China until the maybe Obama administration, and then the USA said, okay, this was a mistake, but I think this period was important for China because the Soviet Union, for example, never had this chance of normal cooperation with some West. And I want to mention again still that now USA repeats their my view, their mistake towards China from 1972 in relation to Vietnam, because Vietnam, the USA now wants to have some cooperation with Vietnam and so on, but at the end, I think Vietnam will have profit from this situation. It's against China now, but China now doesn't need this anymore.
Okay, sorry, I can't accept any more questions now. Maybe after the session. Elias, do you have a quick response to what the lady just asked?
Very quickly, Lula da Silva, in my point of view, support the admission of Brazil to the BRIC, but Lula is one thing, the government is other thing, and the power is other thing. Brazil is very complicated country. Yeah, this is one thing. There is a great battle in Brazil now about the Brazil. First, the Brazil entering the BRIC, and after enter, what do we do with this tool? The other thing is the very weak left wing support in Brazil. For example, in Congress, in Brazilian Congress, there is a 500 deputies in Brazilian Congress. Only 100 is left wing. The Lula government is very weak in terms of foreign affairs and political economy. Very complicated the situation of our government now in all fields of the government. In economics, our political economy is neoliberal. Our position in some points, like Venezuela elections, is very complicated, and it's a very complicated country, Brazil. But Lula da Silva, in terms of BRIC, he was convinced to join the BRIC.
Okay, thank you very much, Elias, and thank you everyone for joining. My special thanks to all our speakers today, Michael, Deng, Salam, Elias, and Radhika. Special thanks to Salam for picking up this really important subject and bringing really concrete substance to what we are having now, the biggest humanitarian crisis, and what the rise of China may bring positive changes to this. So I think I will end it here now. Huh? Yes, thank Michael Roberts as well, obviously, yes. So I will end our session now, and at 4 o'clock, we have the next and the last session for today is on Palestine.
So if I can say something quickly,
Yeah.
First of all, the airline really have to thank